Hi, everybody. This is Carol from the Society of Thoracic Surgeons. This is the Adult Cardiac User Group call for October 21st, 2020, and we are going to get started here. Oh, got to go the right way. Thank you for joining today. I have our IQVIA team with us on the line. We have Jeanette, JJ, Jean, Melanie, and Rhonda. And the STS team, we have Leanne and Melinda are joining me today. Go through some quick STS updates, and then IQVIA has quite an extensive list of updates and overview to go with you through, and then we'll get to your questions. Please submit your questions using the Q&A function, and if you have a ticket number from IQVIA, please include that along with your participant ID number, which is the 5-digit number they can use to track your questions. STS updates, keep it pretty simple. The October training manual is posted. We had probably over 250 questions come in during AQO. Melinda is going through and answering those. We will provide updates in the training manual on those. If there's an overall theme, we'll be providing an update on that. Not quite sure how we're going to handle if we're going to be posting individual responses just to help avoid confusion if things were to ever change with those questions. So kind of still working out that process about how we're going to manage that. But the training manual will be updated in November with a lot of those questions that came in through the AQO meeting. Harvest 1 2020 update, the benchmark report will be coming soon. The risk adjusted dashboard is available now. And Harvest 3 closed on September 4th. Again, the COVID-19 positive patients will be removed from analysis. Just be aware of that. And that's pretty much all I have for STS right now. I am going to hand it over to Joe for the IQVIA update. And we can go ahead and get started, Joe.
Great, thank you, Carol. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to present a couple updates, and then I'm going to do a quick screen share to kind of show you what those things look like. So right here, we just have a couple enhancements that were made to the Harvest Summary Report. We added both a display for the total number of cases, as well as a display for the surgical date range that was selected for the report that appears at the top. And I'll show you that after we get to the end of my second slide here. As far as fixes, these were fixes that went into place in the October 10th release. So these are already in the system. If you go to the next slide. Here we have a couple fixes for the uploader, one being the VDV max and other data elements that were updated to allow for decimal points in version 4.20.2. All those errors should now be resolved. If you're still getting them, I'm going to show you at the end of this slide what you need to do to update the system on your end to clear that. I will qualify that by saying that we are putting through an update this coming weekend that should resolve that for everyone, so you don't need to take this step I'm going to show you. But if you are encountering this error in any uploads performed for the remainder of this week, the fix I'm going to show you should help you get those files in. The second bug there, STS 3266, the upload is showing a red X mark even for successful uploads. We didn't get a lot of reports of that, but it should now be resolved and should no longer occur. If you do encounter that, let us know. But what was happening was that a successful upload was showing a red X, even if it said like 45 of 45 records uploaded, it would still say a red X. The DQRs are accurate. The records do get in. It just shows a red X for some reason rather than the green check mark. So that shouldn't happen any longer. And then finally there, the DQR update for SCS 3894. The operative mortality variable was triggering error messages on the DQR saying that the MTOPD data element was in error. That should no longer occur with your uploads either. All right, so if you want to give me a moment, I'm going to screen share briefly to demonstrate a couple of the things I mentioned in my portion. Thank you. Okay, so what I have up now, this is just my our STS IQVIA test site, so none of the data here is real, but this is does allow you to see what we added to the harvest summary report. Once you run this report and you have it up, you should now see this box here along the top where it gives you the date range reflecting the dates you put in, and then the total number of records is displayed there as well. So the report still functions exactly the same. It's just a bit of extra information to help make that clearer when if you're screenshotting it, or if you're doing just have up the report and you want to remember what date range you selected. This should all be easier to get at a glance. The other thing I was going to demonstrate was with the upload. If you're submitting a file and you get an error for VDV max or VDV grade A or any of those other data elements that were resolved in the October 10th release, to work around that until we get the fix up this weekend, simply choose your file as you normally would, which you can do either by selecting this way, dropping. And once you're at this stage, once you've selected your file, there is a clear mappings button that appears in the lower right over here. Just click on that, and then you can just then confirm it. Clear mappings. And then you should be able to upload, just click upload file, and you should no longer get those error messages. Again, not to harp on it, but that would just be if you're going to upload this week. After this weekend, you should no longer need to do that, and those errors should be cleared for everyone. All right, and I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you, Carol.
Okay, let me share my screen here. There we go.
And we are going to turn things over to Melanie for the remainder of the IQVIA updates.
Oh, am I sticking here on this?
Yes, that's
staying right there.
Okay.
There's an important update that we need to share. Hello, everyone. It's Melanie. So just moving forward with other updates, we did announce in prior sessions where we had identified fixes that were also going to go into that October 10th release. We did have a change in regards to that release date. And so the following items were not deployed to production. So we wanted to make sure that everyone was aware in regards to the items that are listed here for the dashboard and also for the missing variable report. We are scheduling this to go into production and will be notifying using the notification section for these specific items. We are working with STS to do this review, and also there is an upcoming enhancement to the dashboard for the 4.20.2. So I'm going to get to that in a moment also. So these fixes, we will be issuing these at another identified date. And again, we will be sharing that via the notifications section. So just to review what's coming up, it's the STS 2994, the IMA was displaying an incorrect case count. That has been corrected. We just need to, again, deploy to production. Another item is STS 3581, which is related to the dashboard graphs that are not matching the total that is listed within the discharge mortality field specifically. That also has been corrected. And again, we will notify once that's going in. And then for that, you'll see that it's also, there's another item related to the dashboard percentages and graphs. It's actually showing a 0%. That is STS 3387. Again, those are basically the same issue, but I know that support had been also communicating that ID. So just wanted you to know that those are also will be addressed. The next is the missing variable report, and that's STS 3419. The SSN data element, the element on the missing variable was showing that there were missing, those fields were missing in which they were actually not missing on the case form. So the count was incorrect, inconsistent number. And what we did was make an update to that element and also verified that the parent logic, so there was two things that were happening in that bug. The parent logic had to be updated also. So that is also completed. Next is STS 3603. where the MVR indicates variables are missing, but the variable values are present on the form. Specifically, that was for dialysis, warfarin, direct thrombin inhibitors. The values were in the actual case form, but the report for some reason was showing those items as missing. And then the last item is in regards to STS 1864. The sorry, one moment, something is covering my screen. The missing variable report was displaying the initial extubation date time is missing when the field was populated. So that also is corrected. We will just have to, of course, get that scheduled and then notify the user community. So just an update there. Let's go to the next slide. This is related to all of the updates that are also slated to be included into the existing ACSD participant dashboard. These changes and updates are related to the 4.20.2 version specifically. We did have updates that are related to data mapping for incorporating that new version, so that if you were to select a date range that encompassed different versions, we were able to make sure that the variables displayed those results accordingly. Other updates, we incorporated the updated logic related to the PROC ID or procedure identification that's related to the filtering on the dashboard. So once you've selected your parameter option of the time period, and then there's the procedure, that procedure list has also been updated with the 4.20.2 PROC ID logic. Other updates are related to the updates of labels on existing variables. So you may see some changes to names where there may be more information, such as if we're looking at the hospitalization report section and review the payer, primary payer information, some of those variables were updated with new labels and we wanted to make sure that we stayed consistent. So you will see that. And then another update is related to the discharge mortality report section, where we have included the missing percentage calculation to display the hospital discharge date and the mortality date. So both fields have been added and will give you information on the missing percentage.
Melanie, this is Carol. I just want to clarify. When the first bullet point where it says updates will be applied to incorporate data mapping for identified variables between the current version, the previous version, and the version before that, the last three versions, that what this means is maybe you can help me out. What it means is that we in version 4.20, we may have removed variables, we moved them to a different spot, or we added new variables in. So those changes, is it right in my understanding that those changes for the new variables or the removed variables, or if they're getting put in a different spot now for 4.20, that that's what you all are doing at IQVIA? And when you say mapping, you mean that you're adding in or removing variables according
adding
to
in
from
exactly.
Okay.
And I do have an example I was going to walk through for each of these so that we can have an example of what's occurring. So for the data mapping, the example, and we can go to that slide so we can talk through it.
Okay.
And yes, your understanding is correct. So for items, go ahead.
So if there's a variable that's in 2.9 that was removed in 4.2, it's currently, as of today, before these updates get put in place, it's going to show up as missing at the site, even though it's not really a variable in 4.2. Is that correct?
So if the variable is, if they put in a date range for 4.20 and review that variable, if it's not being collected anymore, it's going to show as 0. It's not going to have an actual result.
Perfect. That's what
Right, exactly. And I have an example just to make sure that we're all on the same page of what will happen once these updates are applied. So this first example, and I'm using race, like race documented is what was changed in the 4.20.2. That variable changed even in the structure where it's now a multi-select variable. Whereas before, those responses, they had their own harvest code assignment. But what we did for race is basically make sure that we could map those same responses, and you're able to see those same answers on the actual dashboard. So my example here is the American Indian Alaskan, right? I highlighted that. And as you can see, I selected that, and I have a mixture of dates. And these date ranges overlapped data versions. So you'll see that I have a case that was, the surgery date is 7/16/2020. So that data version is going to be 4.20.2. So I have those results. And then if you see there's another highlighted date, that's 11/15/2018. That is 2.9. So those results are now mapped. So when I click on each one of those options, I will get the actual answers that are going to span across the time period that I selected. And so, of course, you can select your hyperlink to navigate to that case form, and then you would see, of course, the differences of how that variable changed between versions. So hopefully was that clear in regards to, so this is an example of what you will see. Nothing that is a big change for you all. You will just see that you will have the ability to make sure that you're going across data versions and getting those results.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Melanie. Thank you. And when do these changes go into effect, or have they already been implemented?
No, they're not. These are not pushed as yet. So this was the feedback that I provided you to Carol. So we need to round back on that in regards to the updates that are happening for this. So we just need to align on when the push can happen.
Okay, so coming soon, but not yet.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so let's look at the next thing that I wanted to highlight, which is the update to the PROC ID or procedure identification logic. And that logic is, if we look to the right side of the page, you'll see the parameters. And that is where, again, no change on the front end for you. You would go in, select your time period, and then the procedures is where the logic is updated behind the scenes. And so anything that was either added to the logic or removed from the logic, we are now basically applying those changes here. So nothing that you will see on the front end, everything stays the same. You would go in and of course select the different procedures you would like to review on the dashboard, but know that of course the logic will be applied once we push these changes. And again, on the other side is just to show you that I am entering in a date range that is specifically for the 4.20.2. You'll see that I have in 7/1/2020 through, I believe that's today's date, and basically getting back those results, and the cases that I'm targeting should then, of course, apply that PROC ID logic to bring back, if I selected isolated cabbage, it's bringing back those isolated cabbage cases based on that new logic. Okay, and let's go to the next slide. So one other update that we also had noted is related to the discharge mortality report section, where this additional information has been added, where you're able to see the missing percentage on the hospital discharge date and also the mortality date. You would be able to see those calculations quickly here.
Yeah, that's very helpful, because this is what we're using in specifically mortality date, and I think that their status at the mortality date and the other fields for the mortality threshold. So it's good to see the percentages. Thank you for doing that.
Mhm. And I think that may be the last one. Let's just double check. What's the it's going into the support plan. So that was the last in regards to the updates.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Melanie. So
You're welcome.
this is Carol again. These are our support plan. If you have a question regarding the IQVIA platform, please reach out to ststechsupport@iqvia.com or give them a call. And it's the tiered system, and it can take a few days. If it is escalated to tier 2, it can take a few days for a response to get back to you. And we can go to Q&A. So please submit your questions using the Q&A function. Our next webinar will be November 4th, and it will be the adult monthly webinar.
Hey, Carol, it's Rhonda.
Hey, Rhonda.
Do you want me to do a quick demo still of the dashboard report?
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, so this is the benchmark dashboard report.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Thank you. I'll
Oh,
stop
it looks
sharing.
like that slide got chopped out. Sorry about that. Yeah, it should have come right after this one.
I probably not sure what happened, but
It's okay.
yes, please.
Yep. Thanks,
Thank you.
Rhonda.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Rhonda.
no problem. Okay, let me share my screen.
Okay.
Okay. Is my screen up now?
Nope, not yet.
Okay.
You have a little one, huh?
I do. I'm so sorry. She's been
No, don't
like
apologize.
Angel all day,
We
and she just
can see your screen's coming up now.
okay. Okay. So this is the, and let me just real quick go back here. I wanted to try to have everything kind of queued up a little bit so that we weren't waiting for anything. But once you navigate to your reports page, you'll have this option now for the dashboard report that we've all been going into. And in the drop down, you'll see that we have just the first harvest here. As new harvests get introduced, you'll see additional selections for those harvest periods within that drop down that you can select. And select a harvest period and apply parameters will get you into that report. And so I have generated the report for reporting period for the first harvest, and that's what we're looking at here. On the navigation page, oh, and also I just want to call out real quick that I am in a test environment. So, you know, nothing you see here is related to any participants. This is a test environment. But okay, so on this homepage, you have the different areas that we used to see in that paper report. So there's the quality ratings, the quality rating details, rating trends, the NQF reporting, and then at the bottom, those risk adjusted variables. And so each one of these buttons represents, each one of these represents a button that takes you to the that report. So under the quality ratings cabbage, if I click that, I am going to the composite quality rating for the cabbage procedure. And as you see here on screen, we have, the report has a top section where there's a tabular display of those results. So we see the first columns represent that participant, the participant values, and then on the right side, we see the STS values. So we can compare our participant to the STS scores. And then we also have that star rating here. And below the graph has the legend for what each one of those stars represents. And then right below that, we have the graphical display of that tabular data. So it gives us a more visual representation of that information. So we can quickly see how we fell relative to the STS and if we made it within that confidence interval range, within the min range, the max range. And then another feature of this report is that some of these values appear close together here. So you have this zoom slider that you can adjust and you can hone in on those numbers or hone in visually on where these lines fall. And another feature is that if you've adjusted the zoom to hone in on that information and you left your zoom slider here and we navigated out of the report, this will be retained for this session so that when I click export report, you're now exporting this report to show the image that way that we left it with that zoomed in. And there's a little note here too about that zoom functionality. And if you have zoomed in and you don't want to export that, you can refresh your browser to reset all of the zooms. Going to an example of the quality ratings detailed report, we have that tabular display of our data, gives us our eligible procedures, the counts by the different areas as we see here. And then what we can do with these counts is I can click on that 20 and it would produce the case list for that below here. Again, it's a test environment, so we've implanted data. So I'm not seeing the exact 20. It's just more to show that that's what would happen. But you should, clicking on each one of these examples, drill down to that count. Okay, going back to the main page.
I think we want you to pass your baby around, Rhonda.
I wish I could. No. She would probably love that. She's a very social child already. So then going on to the ratings trend graph here, as you can see, it's the star ratings that we were used to seeing. So it gives you that star rating. And we currently only have one harvest period, which is why we only have one column of data. But this graph or this table will grow as we get more harvest in, and you'll be able to see that trend within this ratings trend report. So it's called ratings trend, and it's not a trend just yet, but it will be as we get more harvest data in. And now let's go to an example of the NQF report. So the NQF measures report, again, has that same, the table data is up top, and then below we have that graphical display. What you get with the NQF, though, is the ability to drill down. So I can click that row and I can click see details. And within this tab would be the details, the eligible procedures for that row that I selected. Clicking back to graphs would take me back to this page. And I can go on to see the details of another row. Clicking this home button will always take you back to this home page. And now, finally, an example of the risk adjusted reports. So the risk adjusted reports for each procedure is set up the same, where you have your different areas segmented. I'm sorry, guys. I am so sorry. All right. And so,
Okay, Brenda, as you're, I just want to explain real quick, the risk adjusted report is different from the benchmarked report. The risk adjusted report, even though you saw benchmark data on the other screens, the risk adjusted report is are the risk models and the endpoints that those risk models produce. So it's different than the benchmark report, which will show you all of the outcomes data that you're used to seeing, things like blood usage and vent times, and things like that. It's different in that these are the endpoints of those risk models. So not everything is risk models, like blood usage isn't part of the risk models. It's not part of one of the endpoints of the risk models. So just so there's a little bit of understanding about that, these are different reports that you're showing. And I know that we get questions about, where's all the rest of the data, and all of the rest of the data is coming in the benchmarked reports. So what Rhonda's showing you right now is just the risk model, risk adjusted data from those endpoints.
yes, thank you. That was a good call out. So, right, once we get that benchmark data in, we'll see another section here for the benchmark reports, and you'll see some of that other data, like your demographics, comorbidities, those type things that we saw in the paper report, we will see here in an upcoming release. Thank you for that call out. Finally, what I would like to show is that there is, and I kind of touched on it a second ago, but this export report button, by clicking that, it will pull together all of the pages of the report into one PDF, which I have already produced right here, like the cooking show. So that way we didn't have to wait. And it is just that all the pages that we can click through from that homepage are now here in this PDF that can be shared and saved, amongst coworkers. One more thing I would like to show, just because I think it's pretty cool, and I don't know if it's as known. You can also, if you want, export the report to PowerPoint. So we have some printing best practices set up. There's in the library a video, and I think it's in the FAQs. But if you go in and you make these selections and hit OK, you will get a pretty cool PowerPoint printout of the report. It does print all pages, so you would probably want to delete like the extra patient tables if you haven't produced data there. But exporting to PowerPoint, it will create a nice PowerPoint. And I actually have one open to show you here. So this is what the PowerPoint printout would look like. So it's very similar to the PDF. Anything that you've zoomed in on would stay. And that is all I have for today. Thank you so much.
This is really great, Rhonda. Thank you so much. And I think this is what people were looking for. You know, they want to print out their reports and, you know, not one page at a time. So I think that that's exactly what folks were looking for. So thank you for that.
No problem. Thank you.
Just to give a little bit more context as well, within the library, which is accessible on the left side of the interface, going to the resource library, there is a PowerPoint walkthrough that includes instructions on how to do that export and how to navigate around all of the various sections of this new report. So we would definitely encourage you to refer to that. And that'll be available. That's already available for your easy reference outside of this meeting. And of course, this will be recorded and posted, but you can go and refer to that right away.
Great. Thank you, Jeanette. That's really helpful. And Rhonda, we'll request that you bring your baby girl back for updates.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. So thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, Melanie and Joe. We're going to go to questions now. And I know Joe's been answering some already in the Q&A. So if you submitted a question and we don't read it out loud, it's probably answered by Joe in the Q&A in the answered section. So the first question, it says, during the last user group call, there was talk of a webinar near the end of the month for the 3-year cabbage composite. I haven't seen anything posted on that yet. Is it still coming? So that will be coming out through our QMTF, which is our Quality Metrics Task Force, and they will be hosting that webinar, and they will be the ones putting out that information regarding it. If I get any follow-up from them, I will check in and see what we have and be able to provide that information to you. Rhonda got lots of positive feedback. Next question, per our IRB approval, we do not include patient identifiers when we harvest data. HIC number or MBI is a patient identifier. What does STS use this number for, and why do we need to include it in our data? So that's a great question. The HIC number or MBI number, which was used previously known as the Social Security number, which CMS is getting away from issuing. They changed it over to this HIC number or MBI number to kind of like a de-identified number, I guess, if you will. The reason what STS uses it for is for CMS linkage, and we also use it for linkage to the NDI. We use it for long-term follow-up, and we also use it to check for socioeconomic status and other public health research that we do, looking at geocoding and kind of combining it with geocoding and SSNs and things like that. So that's what we do it, what we use it for. But you are not required to submit it if your site does not allow you to submit it. The IQVIA examples would be best shown as if you ran this now, it would look like this. I don't know what that means, Beth, but thank you for the feedback. If a date for deep sternal infection is entered, but the date is outside the range, is there logic to change a yes to a no? So I do believe that there is, let me pull up the field here. Hold on one second. Get out of my screen share or out of the full screen. Let's see. I just want to pull it up, and so we're talking about the same thing here. The question is regarding the date for the deep sternal wound infection, and I believe it's 4.20. So let's see what that looks like. Okay. So 6705, and I do believe that I use that data and we compare it to these two answers, either within 30 days or greater than 30 days, and it should be providing you with an inconsistency check on that. I think IQVIA, you would need to verify that for me if we do have that inconsistency check in place. Anybody?
Sorry, Carol, what was the field?
Sure, it's this deep sternal INF-DT 6705. If there's a check between this field and deep stern in 6700 for these two choices.
Okay, I'll have to take a look.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't have the list in front of me. On the next harvest report, what happened to our like hospital comparisons? Also, how can we get the reports to export in landscape? So like I said, the like hospital comparison, that's your benchmarked report, and that's coming in the near future. We're just finalizing, IQVIA is finalizing a few things regarding that, and Rhonda's working on that as well. And then how can we get the report to export in landscape? I'm not sure if that's an option or not, Rhonda or Jeanette or Melanie, if you know.
We actually looked at it printing in landscape, and it wasn't a really great experience. So it will print by default in portrait, because when we tried both options, the portrait view did look better. But once you've got it exported, you can certainly change your view settings and convert it to landscape if you prefer that view.
Great, thank you. Next question was, why can't we see breakdown of elements as seen on the paper report, like return to OR for bleeding? So that should be on the benchmark report when that comes out. It'll be more more detail like that. What does clear mapping mean? I'm confused if we need that in the future. And I think Joe answered this one in the answered section already. But Joe, did you have anything to add for that question?
No, it just that's the button that you'll need to use if you need to clear, if we've made an update and you're still experiencing the errors post update, like with the VDV max or any of those data elements that are not letting the decimals through. Just push that button if you are experiencing those errors, and those should clear out for you.
Great, thank you. For IQVIA, if I want to get cases for multiple variables in the ACSD if I want to get cases for multiple variables in the ACSD reports from ACSD reports, is there a way to export them in one Excel file? Currently, I only export data to separate Excel files and merge the two data sets based on record ID, but it is time consuming. Is there an easier way to do this task?
If you could share which report specifically you're concerned about here, that would be helpful for us to more effectively answer this. Some of the reports, while they have multiple sections, some of the data in the sections does vary. And so it's difficult to get an Excel export with a consistent format. So we would need to follow up on the particular report you're referencing in order to really clarify this question. But it's possible this may be an area that we would seek to improve in future if this is a need that's being experienced by others as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. For IQVIA, if I want to get mortality date, discharge date, and mortality status follow-up date for mortality cases from IQVIA, is there an easy way to do this instead of clicking on abstraction page for every patient? I think this person's looking to run a report on mortality, discharge, and mortality status for all of the patients.
Not at this time. We would need to look into this as a potential enhancement to the system to make this available.
Thanks, Jeanette. Next question, what STS versions will be included in the data mapping? So currently we have 2.8 and 2.9 mapped in IQVIA, and with version 4.2 that will be added. Anything to add to that, IQVIA team?
No, that's perfect.
That's it.
Thank you. When will we be able to filter by surgeon? So the filtering by surgeon is something that may come in the future. I think we're still working out details related to that, and we'll let you know if anything changes. I believe that this has to do with the integration between our systems at STS and IQVIA, and what we're going to allow regarding the filtering by NPI. Was the PROC ID not showing right now? I think it's still showing based off of 2.9, but that PROC ID hasn't changed, just the mapping within the PROC ID. Is that correct, Melanie and Jeanette?
That's correct. It's the logic that drives what is going to present in each of those the procedures.
Mhm.
So PROC ID logic right now is in place for 2.9 and 2.81. So when you're running that specific dashboard report and you select the procedures, that logic that we're updating is going to be related to the 4.20.2.
Great, and I'll just show here, we do have an updated PROC ID chart that was updated in October 2020. And this is just the changes that you might notice. It could be something where we updated a harvest code to be included in the PROC ID that may have been missing previously, or it's mapping changes that were done, or spelling things. One thing that we added here, we added the choice of pacemaker, which was not previously there because we had changed this field a little slightly. So those are the types of mapping issues related to the PROC ID chart. Our hospital decided not to participate in the 90-day deep sternal wound infection follow-up. We have one patient that had a deep sternal infection within 30 days. The guideline says that if the deep sternal wound infection is coded yes, we are supposed to code 90-day sternal wound infection as yes. Does it apply to the hospital that decided not to participate in the 90-day follow-up? You can still be coding it as yes, but Melinda, do you want to take that one?
I'm going to read it one more time first.
Okay. Next question. On the STS monthly FAQ, would STS please include the short name as well as the field sequence numbers? It makes it easier to reference and utilize the FAQ. So actually I can show you, let's see what we're talking about here. I'm assuming you're talking about the summary sheet. And we have the sequence number here. I guess you're looking to add the short name in. We can do that as well. I suppose we'll see what type of bandwidth Melinda has to do that, but thanks for the feedback. I asked this question on a previous call and it was not answered. It was going to have some follow-up, but I did not receive a response. I hope you can help. When looking at the dashboard in the post-operative event section, it is broken down to yes, no, and missing, represented by colors. It appears to be adding the sections together, but it does not add up to 100.
This is Jeanette. I can take this one. So Crystal, we did check. We've not heard from you that we've seen on the IQVIA support side. So if anything does come up in one of these calls and your question has not been answered, we would always encourage you to reach out to the support team so that we can follow up with you. If you have initiated a request, please do feel free to include that original ticket information. But if you've not, it is difficult for us to know how best to reach you because we don't always have the right contact information for you. And we may have multiple users with a similar name in the system. So apologies that we were not able to connect with you after the last call. We would expect for most fields that the sections would add up to 100% in that view. If you're not seeing that, if you could share those specifics by reaching out to the IQVIA support, I believe it's STS, here we go, STS tech support at IQVIA.com. We can dig into that more specifically for you. There are some fields, I think particularly in the new 4.20 spec, where the race field is a multi-select field. So you could have a patient who is multiple races. So when I say they should mostly add up to 100%, that kind of thing is what I mean. Sometimes patients do have multiple answers to things, but we will definitely look into the specifics of your situation if you can share that out.
Thank you, Jeanette. That's very helpful.
Carol, I have an answer for Victoria now. This is Melinda.
Sure, go ahead.
So Victoria's question was, our hospital decided not to participate in the 90-day deep sternal wound infection follow-up. We have one patient that had a deep sternal wound infection within 30 days. The guideline says that if the deep sternal wound infection within 30 days is coded yes, you're supposed to also code 90-day deep sternal wound as yes. And her question is, does it also apply to hospitals decided not to participate in the 90-day follow-up? And in the training manual, there's pretty clear instructions for sites who do not normally follow the infection for 90 days. You are to code yes within 30 days and also code yes within 90 days for these patients that have a deep sternal wound infection within 30 days. For all your other patients, you can just code unknown since you're not following them.
And I pulled up the training manual. This is an update that was provided in August that addresses this. Thanks, Melinda.
You're welcome.
Next question, where would you find the temp COVID for Q3 cases in IQVIA? So actually those are being added. Jeanette, do you want to touch on that at all? More information on those COVID fields that we'll be adding?
Well, if it's just in viewing the DCF equivalent, that section, oh gosh, this is adult. Is it pre-op risk factors or demographic?
Oh, it's in the risk factor section.
Okay. Yeah. So if it's viewing the form view itself, it would be in the risk factors section. As far as showing those variables within reports, that is something that we will be following up on in an upcoming release. And those, the COVID details will be included in the current participant dashboard report, which is not the risk adjusted report, but the current participant dashboard report.
Great, thank you so much. Another suggestion, Melinda, is to add the short names into the FAQs.
Yes, I saw that.
Okay, next question. In this dashboard.
Sorry, real quick, since we were on the COVID, I just wanted to also say that we're also looking at adding an enhancement to include filtering regarding the COVID patients, where you're able to then filter if you want to see just the cases that are flagged as COVID positive patients, also COVID patients that are flagged as COVID that are not positive for COVID. So there are different things that we're looking at enhancing to give you that visibility on the dashboard, and that's also coming.
That's great. Thank you, Melanie. In this dashboard, can you run the entire report to see it all at once instead of selecting just specific areas? So I think Rhonda covered that with the printing, unless they're looking for something. I think that the PDF, running it as the PDF would cover that. IQVIA, do you have anything to add?
No, yeah, just what you said. Clicking the export report button will get you that full report view if you want to see it all at once and not click through the buttons.
Great, thank you. If we submit year only for mortality date for privacy reasons, will that negatively impact our report? Yep. So yes, we need the mortality date. We can't submit year only. We need the mortality date to check for 30-day mortality status. To clarify, for prolonged ventilation, gray is yes, blue is no, green is missing. What is white? That sounds like an IQVIA question.
We need to double check. I think, Crystal, this is one of the questions that you had asked before. Rhonda, can you pull that up and then maybe we can come back to this question?
Sure.
Okay.
Next question. After I emailed my physician champion with the PDF of the risk adjusted dashboard, he asked me if the entire report is available, not just the risk adjusted report. Do you think he is thrown off by the difference of the new report format? Is there somewhere else you would direct him to? So this is the benchmarked report that your surgeon is looking for, is the benchmarked report. And that's the report that's due out in the near future. Next question. I know you've said this, but we might need to be reminded again that the IQVIA report works a lot better in Chrome.
Yes, that's true. It does.
Okay. So use Chrome. If you have Chrome available, use Chrome. If not, ask your IT to download it so you can have the best experience. ICU, will ICU greater than 24 hours show up on future harvest reports like the old report? I do believe that is one of the variables that will be included on the benchmarked report. Probably can verify that. Anybody from IQVIA when you get a chance. Next question. It would be really nice if the type of morbidity was included when you export the list based upon selecting the overall morbidity patient number. Currently, you have to export for each individual morbidity to determine which patients fall into each group. So I think you'll see this better on the benchmarked report, but maybe IQVIA, do you have any suggestions or tips for Deb in seeing this data? Anybody?
I think we're silent because off the top of our heads, we need to double check on this. I know we know a lot about the system, but there is a lot there, and we strive to answer questions as quickly as we can, but
Yeah.
our memory is only so good. So we will maybe look at this in parallel and maybe be able to come back to this in a couple of minutes.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I know as we get as IQVIA platform gets built up, I think there's a lot more for us, for IQVIA and for STS to remember what's going on. And we have a lot of conversations back and forth, and it's tricky to keep everything straight. So it's going to take us a little bit longer to answer some of the questions, like Jeanette said. Next question, can you please tell me if the non-cardiac re-ops are included in the composite scores? I know it is excluded in the NQF measure. So this NQF measure, which is the CABG composite score, is what you would want to look at. And I do want to point these out because I get quite a few questions about what is and what isn't included, and what do we report, what's included in the star ratings, things like that. So I want to show you where, would like to show you all where this is located at. Underneath the STS homepage, and if you go to quality and safety, this is the third blue tab, you'll see performance measures. In this section, it's broken down. These are the adult cardiac measures. All of our measures are NQF endorsed. This is the CABG composite. This is what's used for the CABG composite star rating. It's an outcome, a process, and a composite measure according to the NQF. If you click on this, it will take you to a definition that we have posted on our website. So it's NQF endorsed. It was endorsed in 2011. And this is a combination of 11 NQF endorsed CABG process and outcomes measures, which are grouped into 4 domains. So the 4 domains are preoperative medication, the operative care process, which is a process domain, the risk adjusted operative mortality, which is outcome, and then risk adjusted morbidity. So the perioperative medications that are included, this is for, again, this is your star rating for your composite, are the preoperative beta blockade. This is CABG. Preoperative beta blockade at discharge, the antiplatelet medication at discharge, and anti-lipid treatment at discharge. Then the LIMA, or the internal mammary, and then the risk operative mortality. risk adjusted operative mortality. And then the 5 other endpoints that are included are stroke, surgical reexploration, deep sternal wound infection, post-operative renal failure, and prolonged ventilation. The surgical reexploration, if I want to know more about that, I'm going to go back to measure 0115, which is this measure here. So again, the same page, I just scroll down. So everything that makes up the composite is listed beneath it. You just have to make sure you're clicking on the right one to get more information. So this surgical reexploration NQF 0115, it belongs to the isolated CABG, and it's an outcomes measure. I'm going to click on that, and this will tell me what's included. It's NQF endorsed, and this is for patients 18 or older who underwent an isolated CABG. So again, we define isolated CABGs by looking at the procedure identification chart. If you want to review how the procedure identification chart works, refer back to the April 1st webinar from Adult Cardiac, and there's a nice walkthrough in that video. So, and it's the patient who returns to the operating room for bleeding with or without tamponade, graft occlusion, valve dysfunction, or other cardiac reason. So your other non-cardiac cases are excluded from this, are excluded from this measure. Or they do not negatively impact it. So you just have to read what's included, and you would want to refer to the training manual to see what exactly these definitions mean. These are all post-operative complications. You can find more in the training manual under the definition and intent clarification. So your the other ones that are included in here, if you're looking for anything, it would be here. One that I get often is regarding AFib, and that is not used in any of the NQF or outcomes measures. So that's that one. Can you show us again how to access the mortality threshold? My star rating pages are blank, and wondering if this is because the missing mortality threshold is greater than 2%. Are you able to show, if I stop sharing, would you, IQVIA, are you able to show that?
Sorry, I know we're just coming up on time. We've been doing some fast and furious research on some of the earlier questions, so maybe we could circle back to those. So back to the question about why in the dashboard does it not equal 100%? So in looking at that, at the top of each section in the dashboard, there is a number of cases. In the question about post-operative occurrences of some type, if there were not those types of events, or those were not applicable to the 100% of cases, that's why you would see totals less than 100. So we are double checking that, but when it's checking for 100%, some of the variables are not filled out on all records. So it would be looking at the count of records as compared to the number of cases at the top of each section. We also have a question about the gray is yes, blue is no, green is missing. So there is a legend as part of each view in the dashboard with the sort of colored bars. There is a white space in the box that just lists the total percentage for whatever item you're looking at. That white space isn't a bar or a count of something. That's just the total of the other subsections. So if that answers that question, then that would be great. But if not, if you could please reach out to STS tech support at IQVIA.com with a screenshot of which section you're talking about, Crystal, then we can look more specifically at the area that you're referring to.
Okay. Thank you, Jeanette. That's really helpful. So we are at time, like Jeanette said, and it's time to go. So thank you all for your questions. We did get through 66 of them, which is impressive in 15 minutes. And thank you, Joe and Melanie and Jean for managing the Q&A box and putting your questions in there. Also, Melinda. Thanks again, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of the day.